A man who spent months proving a broken hypercar could be saved is now spending his time explaining himself to lawyers instead of viewers. The same story that made Mat Armstrong one of the most talked about creators in the car world has quietly turned into the biggest legal headache of his career. And the person driving it is someone who once stood beside him for every camera shot. For years, Mat Armstrong built his name on doing what manufacturers said couldn't be done. He took in cars that insurance companies had already written off, machines with bent frames and shattered panels that no dealership wanted to touch, and brought them back to life in front of an audience that grew into the millions. His style was simple. Show everything. Hide nothing. Let people watch the wins and the failures side by side. That formula worked for years, right up until it collided with one of the most exclusive and tightly controlled car brands on the planet. The car at the center of it all was a Bugatti Chiron Purse Sport, one of only around 60 ever built, originally worth well over $3.5 million. Its owner was Alex Gonzalez, a Miami-based trader and content creator known online as FXAlexG, who had built his own following around a flashy, high-energy lifestyle. After a serious crash during a film stunt, the Chiron was declared a total loss. Bugatti quoted close to $1.7 million to bring it back to working order, an eye-watering number even by hypercar standards. Rather than walk away, Gonzalez bought the wreck back at auction and started looking for someone willing to attempt what the factory considered a lost cause. That search led him to Armstrong, whose reputation for rescuing supposedly unfixable cars made him the obvious choice. Armstrong flew from the United Kingdom to Miami to inspect the car in person, and from the moment he agreed to take it on, the project became one of the most closely watched builds on YouTube. Millions of people tuned in to see whether a car this complex, this expensive, and this heavily damaged could actually be brought back from the dead outside of a factory floor. Almost immediately, Bugatti pushed back. The company locked a vehicle identification number tied to the Chiron, which meant no authorized dealer anywhere could legally supply parts for that specific chassis. Headlights, brackets, seals, even basic hardware became impossible to source through official channels. It was widely reported as a deliberate move, with Bugatti's position being that a car this technically demanding needed to return to the factory in Moutier, France, rather than be rebuilt independently. Armstrong and Gonzalez saw it differently, worried that once the car disappeared into the factory system, there was no guarantee it would come back out on any reasonable timeline or budget. Gonzalez responded publicly, as he tended to do, hinting that if Bugatti wouldn't sell the parts needed for the rebuild, they would find another way to get the job done. That kind of statement, aimed at one of the most image-conscious manufacturers in the industry, was never going to go unnoticed. Bugatti Rimac chief executive Mat Rimac ended up responding directly, first through a private message and later through his own video addressing the situation. Rimac laid out the safety concerns Bugatti had about independent repairs on a car built almost entirely from carbon fiber, explained why separating the front and rear structure required specialized handling, and pushed back on some of the numbers circulating online about parts pricing. He also confirmed Bugatti had offered a discounted factory repair, which Gonzalez ultimately turned down. Despite the pressure, Armstrong held his ground and kept the car in his own workshop. What followed was one of the more remarkable rebuild stories the car world had seen in years. His team worked through the separation of the front and rear structure by hand, uncovered hidden damage from the original crash, and machine replacement components using 3D scanning and precision tooling. By the following spring, the engine started, and the car moved under its own power for the first time since the accident, a result that surprised plenty of people who assumed the project would stall out entirely. Along the way, the build turned up some genuinely surprising details about what actually sits inside a car this expensive. Certain safety components and mechanical parts reportedly match pieces used in far more ordinary vehicles built by the same parent company, the kind of shared platform engineering that's common across the auto industry, but rarely discussed openly when the sticker price runs into the millions. That detail resonated with viewers because it reframed the entire conversation. If a hypercar and a mainstream family car can share certain underlying components, then the massive gap between factory repair pricing and independent repair costs starts to look less like a reflection of pure engineering complexity and more like a reflection of brand control. Armstrong never framed the project as an attack on Bugatti specifically, but the footage spoke for itself. and it spread far beyond his usual audience because of it. It's worth pausing here to give Bugatti's side its due as well, since a fair account of this story has to include it. Rimac's explanation for the company's caution wasn't unreasonable on its face. A car capable of speeds most road vehicles will never approach carries genuine risk if structural repairs are handled incorrectly, and a manufacturer has legitimate reasons to worry about liability, reputation, and safety when an owner insists on going the independent route. Whether that caution was a full explanation or only part of a bigger picture involving pricing and control is something reasonable people can disagree on, and it's a debate that extends well beyond this one car and this one dispute. That success is what makes everything that happened afterwards so jarring. Once the rebuild wrapped up and the attention around it started to fade, the relationship between Armstrong and Gonzalez broke down. Gonzalez began sharing his own account of what went on behind the scenes, and it painted a very different picture than the one millions of viewers had watched unfold on screen. Instead of the feel-good comeback story everyone had followed for months, Gonzalez suggested there were serious problems with how the project was handled, and he did not hold back in saying so to his own audience. Armstrong, for his part, has acknowledged that legal pressure connected to his recent projects is real. Earlier this year, he addressed the topic with his viewers directly, without going into specifics about where exactly that pressure was coming from or what form it might take. That alone was notable, because Armstrong has built his entire channel around transparency, and choosing to stay vague on this particular subject suggested the matter had moved past the usual back and forth of online drama and into something with actual legal weight behind it. In interviews since then, Armstrong has tried to explain his side of the relationship with both Gonzalez and Bugatti without escalating things further. He's described the dynamic with Rimac as more complicated than a simple rivalry, suggesting there's mutual respect between them even as public commentary online tends to frame it as a straightforward feud. He's been noticeably more careful, though, when the subject turns to Gonzalez specifically, choosing his words a way that avoids directly contradicting or confirming the claims being made against him. That kind of caution is unusual for a creator who spent years building trust by narrating every decision out loud, and says something about how seriously he's treating the situation, even if he hasn't laid out the full picture publicly. For viewers who followed the rebuild from the very first video, the falling out is a strange thing to process. The two of them appear together constantly during the project, with Gonzalez expressing gratitude on camera and celebrating milestones alongside Armstrong as the car came back to life. Watching that same relationship unravel afterward, playing out through separate videos and competing narratives rather than a joint conversation, has left a lot of the audience uncertain about who to believe, and understandably reluctant to draw firm conclusions from clips and comment sections alone. What's important here is separating what's confirmed from what's still just noise online. There is no shortage of video titles and short clips claiming Gonzalez has formally taken Armstrong to court, some describing detailed courtroom outcomes that simply cannot be verified through any established news outlet at this point. That kind of content spreads fast because the story itself is dramatic, but a title promising a courtroom battle is not the same thing as a filed, confirmed lawsuit with public documents behind it. What is verifiable is that the personal relationship between the two men has clearly and publicly fallen apart. That Gonzalez has made serious claims about how he was treated during the process, and that Armstrong has confirmed he is dealing with legal matters tied as content, without detailing them further. Anyone presenting more than that as settled fact right now is filling in blanks that haven't actually been filled in yet. While that personal dispute plays out largely through public statements and online reaction, a separate and far more clearly documented legal fight has emerged that adds real weight to the broader pattern people have been noticing. A Bugatti dealership in Miami, Bremen Motors, filed a lawsuit against Bugatti of the Americas, the company that distributes and oversees Bugatti sales in the United States. According to that filing, Bremen had legally requested and initially received approval for higher warranty reimbursement rates under Florida's dealer protection laws. Later, Bugatti reversed course, informed the dealership it would no longer be authorized to handle warranty repairs, and cited excessive labor and parts costs as the reason. The lawsuit also alleges Bugatti favored a rival dealership when allocating its newest hypercar model and engaged in direct sales to customers that bypassed the dealership entirely, something Florida franchise law specifically restricts. That case has been covered by established automotive outlets and industry publications, with court filings backing up the specific numbers involved, including the requested labor rate, the timeline of Bugatti's approvals and reversals, and the allocation disparity between dealerships. Unlike the online chatter around Armstrong and Gonzalez, this dispute has a documented paper trail sitting in a Florida courthouse, which makes it a much sturdier example of the same underlying tension people keep noticing across this entire saga. Put next to everything happening with Armstrong's rebuild, a clear theme starts to show up across every one of these separate conflicts. Locking a vehicle identification number to block parts access, pressuring a franchise dealership over reimbursement rates, and steering customers toward factory-controlled repair channels all point toward the same underlying priority: keeping tight control over who gets to touch these cars and who profits from doing it. Armstrong didn't set out to expose any of that when he agreed to rebuild a wrecked Chiron. He just wanted to prove a car everyone assumed was finished could run again. But by filming the entire process and sharing every discovery along the way, he ended up putting a spotlight on questions the ultra-luxury car industry generally prefers stay unasked. That's also exactly why the personal fallout with Gonzalez lands as such an awkward footnote to an otherwise compelling story. Viewers who cheered through every stage of the rebuild are now left holding two very different accounts of what happened once the cameras stopped rolling on the project itself. Some are inclined to take Gonzalez's claims seriously given how publicly and directly he made them. Others point out that Armstrong has spent years building a reputation on total transparency, which makes disputed allegations against him land differently than they might for a less established creator. Neither position has enough solid, independently confirmed evidence behind it yet to settle the question either way, and it's worth being honest about that rather than picking a side based on whichever video happens to have the more dramatic thumbnail. What can be said with confidence is that the technical achievement at the center of this entire saga actually happened. The car runs. The rebuild footage is real and has been reviewed extensively by other mechanics and car enthusiasts online, many of whom have backed up Armstrong's claims about part sourcing and repair costs. The gap between Bugatti's official pricing and what independent, skilled labor can achieve using standard parts and careful work is well documented across multiple videos and outside reporting, regardless of how the personal dispute with Gonzalez eventually gets resolved. Separately, the Brayman dealership lawsuit is moving through Florida's court system on its own timeline, adding institutional backing to concerns that a single independent creator's claims alone might struggle to carry on their own. Where this leaves Armstrong right now is a genuinely uncomfortable spot. His entire audience was built on him showing every step of a process honestly, including the mistakes. That openness is precisely what made his channel different from a typical car review or lifestyle account. But now that same instinct to share everything comes with real risk attached. Since any offhand comment about an ongoing legal matter could complicate his position in ways that no amount of goodwill from viewers can undo, he has to keep making content, keep engaging with an audience that expects the same transparency that built his channel in the first place, while simultaneously being far more careful about what he actually says on camera than he's ever had to be before. There's also a broader lesson here for anyone who follows creators like Armstrong closely and has less to do with Bugatti or Gonzalez specifically than with how these stories tend to spread once they leave the original source. A single ambiguous comment from a creator about legal pressure can turn, within days, into dozens of videos confidently describing a courtroom battle complete with outcomes, when in reality the underlying situation is still murky and unresolved. That gap between what's actually known and what gets repeated as fact is where most of the confusion around this story lives right now. It's worth remembering that a dramatic title is designed to earn a click, not to reflect the current state of a legal filing. And the responsible way to follow a story like this is to keep watching for actual documentation, rather than accepting the loudest version as a truth. None of this erases what the Chiron project actually proved. A car that one of the most exclusive manufacturers in the world insisted could only be repaired at its own factory, using tools supposedly found in only 2 places on the planet, ended up running again in an independent workshop with commercially available equipment and a lot of patience. That fact doesn't disappear regardless of how the dispute with Gonzalez eventually plays out or how the Brayman lawsuit against Bugatti resolves in court. It simply means the story around Mat Armstrong right now is more complicated than the tidy underdog narrative that first made him famous, and untangling what's genuinely confirmed from what's just clickbait speculation is going to matter more than ever as the situation continues to develop. For now, the honest answer is that some parts of the story are settled fact, some are serious but unresolved allegations, and some are simply unverified claims spreading faster than the actual truth can catch up to them.